Hello everybody, Josh here with Aaron Roizen, our head winemaker, and we're here to talk to you a little bit about our sparkling wine program. So much like the prestigious houses in Champagne, Lamoureux also declares vintage years. However, in non-vintage years, we're a little different in that we don't make sparkling at all. So with the Lamoureux sparkling program, you're always going to get a vintage. You're always going to get a little mark on the bottom of the bottle. It says it's spent time on that riddling rack. You're going to have a guarantee that it's spent 3 years in tirage. Those are the hallmarks of quality of our program. There's a lot of different ways we could make this product, but there's only one way to make it right. So understanding that you could make a sparkling wine in a couple hours by blowing some CO2 into a tank. You could also do Charmat method and do a fermentation in tank. You can do the ancestral method. Each one a little bit more complex and adding a little bit more to the wine, but there's really only one way to do it right, and that is the method champenois, the traditional method. So that's really what we're here to talk to you about today. Like everything else at Lamoureux, that starts in the vineyard. Very important to understand what the process does. Aaron will talk to you a lot more about kind of the amplification of wine faults. So you do any type of wine style that takes 10 steps and over the span of 3 years to a couple decades, time in the bottle is only going to kind of concentrate and amplify what's already there. So if you don't start with the most pristine fruit, the finest of juices, you really don't have a shot at achieving greatness down the road, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, likely to just be disappointed. So out in the vineyard, this particular offering is our 2014 Blanc de Blanc. So this is 100% Chardonnay that we're going to talk to you about today. But realize that we do also make Brut and Blanc de Noir in the years when the Pinot Noir cooperates. So we have vintage years, and then we have vintage years when the Pinot cooperates, which is even more seldom. So keep that in the back of your head when you get a Brut from Lamoureux Landing, or the 19 Blanc de Noir. When that comes time, then you're really getting something exceptionally special. So Chardonnay in the vineyard, Clone 4. It's a Martini clone from California. It was isolated way back when. Why Clone 4? Naturally high in acidity. So very low pH, high in acidity, very slow ripening. So you're going to achieve the proper chemistry, assuming that Mother Nature cooperates, which is always interesting in the Finger Lakes. You're going to have a better shot at getting 18 bricks and about 12 grams of sugar at the same time. So in a really warm year, those 2 points don't align, as the grapes are ripening. But with this clone, with our site, our soil, our average weather, it should be possible, 3 to 5 years every decade. And it's been increasingly more challenging, but certainly we're up for the challenge. So as I mentioned at the beginning, everything is done by hand. So when that fruit does hit the parameters, we're hand harvesting, whole cluster press on the press pad. It's a little counterintuitive, but we want the stems in there, not for the contact with the juice, but for creating channels to get that free run, pristine juice out of the press very quickly and in here and protected with the winemaking team. So when the grapes aren't fully ripe, you want to just get the juice out, away from the skins, away from the seeds, away from the stems. So So that's about where I turn it over in real life. Everybody's out there loading these 30, 35 pound lugs of fruit into the press. But once the juice comes off, then it comes in here for the magic to happen. So, Aaron, take it away.
So after the fruit comes in, which is hand-picked, we will whole cluster press. And like Josh was saying, we leave the rachis intact with the fruit. And the biggest purpose is that we do not want to agitate those skins in any way to pull up any potential phenolics, because there's an exponential bitterness that can come through the finished wine after primary fermentation. So the grapes go into the press, whole cluster, and when we press them, the highest amount of pressure is 3 pounds per square inch, so hardly any pressure. So because of that, we have really, really clean, low to no phenolic juice, so there's no bitter compounds in there. So once the juice comes out, all that free run is clarified, and it goes through a really clean, slow cold fermentation. We use a really strong yeast strain that's isolated from the Champagne region, and we use a really strong yeast strain because we want the fermentation to be as healthy and as straightforward as possible, because we're going to get all of those aromatics, those esters, all that texture, that flavor profile that's already in the fruit from the vineyard, but we're not going to be able to taste that until a minimum of 3 years after it being bottle conditioned in the bottle. So we allow it to have nice and clean, stress-free fermentation. Then after that, or a certain period of time of tank aging in stainless steel, then it will go to secondary fermentation in the bottle. So we build up a secondary starter culture, which is using the same yeast that was used for primary fermentation. It goes to do secondary fermentation. That allows for another ease of secondary fermentation, because now you're looking at a fermentation that is much more difficult. It's a higher amount of alcohol, even though it's not really that high. It's usually around 10 to 11%, but it's in a pressurized atmosphere that creates lots and lots of pressure. So the osmotic pressure can be pretty difficult for the yeast to finish fermentation in the bottle. So after secondary fermentation finishes in the bottle, then that wine is allowed to age in tirage for a minimum of 3 years here. And then after it's done aging, it will be taken out of the aging boxes and put on riddling racks, where we have this 21 rotation process that is the same as been used in Champagne for hundreds of years. And it does the trick. It knocks the lees, the yeast that are on the side of the bottle, off slowly and gently, so it slowly goes to the neck of the bottle. And then after that is accomplished, then it goes to the neck chiller with the rest of the applications, which is I can show you right now. So this is the glycol neck chiller. So in here is a very cold glycol bath. Right now it's about 5 degrees below Fahrenheit. So you take it out, take the bottle out, rinse off the glycol, which is food grade. This is where we remove the crown cap and the bedule. That also releases the yeast plug that's in the neck of the bottle. From there, we go to the dosage station, where our sulfites and sugar solution are. And we put the stopper on there to allow for everything to come together, because with that dosage creates a very active atmosphere and environment for the CO2 that's never really that hasn't seen any outside intervention for the last 3 to now 7 years. So it takes a while for it to acclimate. After that, we'll go through the corker. Here, we'll go to a leveler, and the plunger will put the cork halfway down into the bottle. where you see it like that. So that's what the cork looks like before the wire hood is put on. And then we walk it over to the station with the wire hood, and we put it on the pedestal, and we compress down like so, making sure that we get 1, 2, 3, 4 spins. We pull it back up, push the wire up like that, and that is the completed disgorgement of the 2014 Blanc de Blanc.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. Fascinating process, but well worth it. So Aaron mentioned a couple of things there that were, very interesting. So autolysis, what is it? How is it expressed or not expressed in our wine, Aaron?
Well, with yeast autolysis, we're seeing the breakdown of the yeast cells in the bottle. So when the wine is young in the bottle, it's really leaning towards more of that bright, racy acidity that we get from the fruit. And as the wine ages over time, with the yeast lees in the bottle, it creates this creamy texture. It creates this flavor profile that's in the wine, much like barrel aging is. The yeast allow for the flavors to come out and really develop in a whole different manner. So with the yeast autolysis, it helps balance the acidity, creates texture, and then a very important thing, and one of the big reasons why the wine is aged for so long, for so many years in the bottle, is during all that pressure, the yeast facilitate to create this fine bubble, this really tiny mousse that you see. So you have very small bubbles, but also very persistent mousse in your glass that is persistent. It keeps lifting all the aromatics that are there, and that's why there are so many components to the secondary part of the bottle tirage.
Yeah, so that's another distinction with, again, drawing parallels to champagne as far as vintage and non-vintage, whereas vintage, when a vintage is declared, it's 3 years minimum, which just like we do. The non-vintage could be on the leads for as few as 15 months. So, and I think, most of the research that we've seen, autolysis doesn't even start until 18 months. So, really understanding those trade-offs of time versus quality and time versus complexity is huge. So, yeah, to get this type of bead, this type of mousse, and again, 3 years is our minimum. This is what, the 4th, 5th, 6th lot that we've disgorged from the 14. So we're going on, 6 to 7 years on the lees now. So just layering on top of those primary and secondary flavors and characters, we're getting those tertiary, aging, those bready, toasty, almond complexity that's starting to creep into this wine. And that's what I love about it. It's like you said, it's just a chameleon. It changes, as far as the temperature to drink this at. It's a completely different wine for me cold. How does it change so much though? I like it just as much at a warmer temperature, but it's completely different. How does that happen?
Well, I think it speaks again to the flavors, the aromatics, the esters that were created from primary fermentation that are translating exponentially as the wine ages. So if we didn't have really incredibly clean, perfect fruit, the wine would not be able to be drank at any temperature. It would be, maybe ice cold, but because it's the way it's been built and grown and aged, that from a temperature that's maybe 10 degrees too warm than you typically would drink sparkling to really cold, there's still things that come out and things that keep changing, and that persistence of the bubbles, that mousse, all these other textural things that are only present in a method sparkling wine and with the sparkling wine that has been aged for so long. Like at the 5-year mark is when things just completely start changing and it just turns into a completely different wine.
As far as food pairings with this, I would challenge anyone to find a food that you couldn't pair with sparkling wine, or specifically this sparkling wine, but really anything from your appetizers to any type of cheeses. I mean, you can go unconventional, and chicken wings, fried chicken. It's really pretty universal in its pairing. But what is your favorite kind of all-time sparkling pairing?
Well, with Lamoureux's sparkling, I love it with lobster, because the acidity and the sweetness combined with that creamy texture of lobster and the sweetness of that really build together. So, it really, to me, is a fascinating, complex combination.
Excellent. Well, hopefully that answers the people's questions about Method Champenois at Lamoureux Landing. You can always come visit us to get more information and taste for yourself. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Josh.
Cheers.
Cheers.